My sister-in-law wants to replace the baby she lost with mine. With the help of my brother and my mother, who are trying to paint me as an unfit mom. I'm 26 years old and just had my first baby 3 weeks ago. My son, whom I'll call Daniel, was born perfect and healthy. My husband Phil, 28, and I have been together for 5 years and married for 2. The problem started when I announced my pregnancy a few months after finding out. My brother Herbert, 32, and his wife Thaisa, 29, had been trying to have children for 3 years. Thaisa suffered 2 miscarriages in the first year and then nothing for a while. Last December, she got pregnant again and made it to 7 months before losing the baby. It was devastating for them and for all of us. When I told the family about my pregnancy, Thaisa immediately left the room. Herbert followed and they didn't return. Later, my mom told me Thaisa had cried for hours that night. I understood her pain, but I couldn't hide my pregnancy forever. I'd rather they heard it from me than from someone else. Things got strange after that. Thaisa began sending me articles about pregnancy complications and stillbirths. She would call my mom with detailed questions about my health and doctor visits. When I went home for Christmas, she kept touching my belly without asking and making comments about how she'd be the best one to take care of the baby. My mom raised Herbert and me alone after our dad died when I was 12. She's always been protective of her kids, but she has a special bond with Herbert because he stayed close to home while I moved away for college and work. She also adores Thaisa, treating her like the daughter she never had. After Christmas, my mom started having strange conversations with me. She asked if Phil and I were truly ready to be parents since we both worked long hours. She questioned if we had enough savings, or if our apartment was big enough. She kept pointing out that Thaisa worked part-time from home and would have more time for a baby. At first, I thought she was just worried about me being a first-time mom far from family. Then, in February, when I was 8 months pregnant, she called with a proposal that sounded insane. But sadly, it was very real. She said Thaisa was struggling badly after her loss, and her grief counselor had suggested being around babies might help her heal. My mom wondered if Thaisa could stay with us for a few weeks after Daniel was born, to help with the baby and bond with him. I told her absolutely not. That's when she revealed the real plan. My mom said Thaisa and Herbert had been talking about adoption, but it was expensive and had long wait lists. Since I was young and had my whole career ahead of me, maybe it would be better if Thaisa and Herbert raised Daniel instead. They had a house with a yard, Thaisa could be a full-time mom, and they were more mature and financially stable. I hung up on her. The call started the next day, not just from my mom but also from Herbert. He said Thaisa was barely eating or sleeping, that she had turned their guest room into a nursery and was already buying baby clothes. He said he was worried for her mental health, and that giving her my baby might save her. He argued that I'd be helping Thaisa heal and giving Daniel a better life at the same time. He asked how Phil and I could possibly give Daniel the attention he deserved. I told Herbert that Daniel is our son and we weren't giving him away, no matter what they said. End of discussion. The pressure only intensified in the following weeks. My mom would call crying about how grief was consuming Thaisa. My aunt, my mom's sister, also started calling, saying the whole family was worried about Thaisa and that I had the power to help. Thaisa never called me directly, but she started commenting on all my social media posts. When I posted a photo of the nursery, she commented that she had picked out the exact same crib. When I posted about buying baby clothes, she said she already had newborn and 3-month outfits ready. The breaking point came when I was 33 weeks pregnant. Thaisa and Herbert showed up unannounced at our apartment one Saturday morning. Phil was at the grocery store, so I was alone when I opened the door. Thaisa pushed past me and went straight to the nursery. She started rearranging things, talking about how she'd set it all up in her house. She had even brought a car seat and said she wanted to make sure it was installed properly for when they took Daniel home. I told her she needed to leave. That's when she completely broke down. She dropped to her knees in the nursery and begged me to give her my baby. She said God had taken her child because she was meant to have mine. She promised I'd still be able to visit him and be part of his life. Herbert tried to calm her down. But she was shouting about how unfair it was that I got to have a healthy baby when I didn't even want him as much as she did. She said I was too young and selfish to be a good mother. I called the police. By the time they arrived, Phil was back and had managed to get Thaisa to stop yelling. The officers took statements but said it was a family matter. They suggested we file for a restraining order if we felt unsafe. Daniel was born 2 weeks later. We didn't tell my family I was in labor. Somehow, my mom found out anyway, and the call started immediately. She cried about missing the birth of her grandchild. Herbert was angry we hadn't included them. But it was Thaisa's reaction that scared me the most. She called from Herbert's phone, and when I answered thinking it was him, she began talking about how excited she was to finally meet her son. She said his room was already ready and she had taken time off work to care for him full time. That's when I realized she really believed Daniel was going to be hers. Phil and I decided to cut off all contact with my family, for now. We blocked their numbers and set all our social media accounts to private. My mom has been sending letters and packages to our building, but we've been returning them unopened. Through someone else, I learned Thaisa has been telling people at her church that we're going through a difficult time and that they're planning to adopt our baby. She's even been asking for donations for baby supplies and showing off a nursery to visitors. Meanwhile, my mom has been telling relatives that Phil's family is influencing us, claiming that Thaisa just needs time to bond with Daniel and that everything will work out. I never imagined my own mother would support someone else's claim over my child. I thought family was supposed to protect each other, not conspire to take away what matters most. Phil has been incredible through all of this. His parents live across the country but have been very supportive and even offered to help us relocate if needed. They were shocked when I told them what my family has been doing. We are seriously considering moving before Daniel gets older. I don't want to live in fear that my brother and his wife will try to take him. The hardest part of all this is grieving the family relationships I thought I had. I believed my mom would always have my back. I thought my brother would protect me and be excited to be an uncle. Instead, they chose to indulge Thaisa's delusion over respecting my rights as Daniel's mother. Phil thinks we should get a lawyer. We don't have one yet, but we're looking. Update 1. Daniel is now 11 weeks old. Luckily, this update isn't directly about him or anything bad happening to him, it's about my family still being unhinged. About a month ago, I decided to reach out to my mom's pastor. He's known our family for years and even officiated Herbert and Thaisa's wedding. I thought maybe he could help Thaisa understand that what she's doing isn't healthy. He listened without interrupting, which I appreciated. When I finished, he admitted he'd noticed some concerning behavior from Thaisa but hadn't realized the full extent of it. He told me Thaisa had been coming to him as part of her grieving process, which was normal and healthy at first. But what worried him was that she had started talking about a baby that would soon be joining her family. Whenever he asked for details, she would only say that God already had something prepared for her. The pastor thought it was just her faith speaking. Now, he understood it was much deeper. He said he would speak with Thaisa and Herbert together and try to help them understand that the path they were on wasn't healthy for anyone. He also offered to mediate a conversation between our families if we were willing. I agreed to give him 2 weeks to work with them, then we'd reevaluate. The first week passed quietly, no calls, no surprise visits, no packages. Phil and I started to hope that maybe professional intervention was helping Thaisa face reality. But then the pastor called with an update, and things got worse. He had met with Herbert and Thaisa 3 times. In the first meeting, Herbert seemed to understand their plan wasn't reasonable. He admitted Thaisa's grief had clouded his judgment and said they needed to respect our decision to raise Daniel. Thaisa's response, however, was completely different. She insisted that I had asked them to raise Daniel because Phil and I weren't ready to be parents. She said our cutting off contact was just a temporary reaction to stress, and that eventually we'd change our minds once we realized how hard parenting really is. The pastor told me Thaisa had detailed plans for Daniel's baptism, his first Christmas, even his first day of school. She spoke about him as if he were already living with them. In the second meeting, the pastor tried to help her understand that Daniel belongs with his parents. Teresa grew agitated and accused him of not understanding God's plan. She said her baby had died so that she could raise Daniel. At the third meeting, Herbert completely changed his attitude. Instead of admitting their plan was unreasonable, he began defending Teresa's right to still expect a family. The pastor told me he would be ending his counseling relationship with them and recommended they seek professional help elsewhere. He was concerned that Teresa's grip on reality was weakening, not strengthening. Then he revealed something that chilled me to the bone. Teresa had been showing up in the church nursery during services and helping with the babies. She even started referring to one baby in particular as practice for when Daniel came to live with them. When the child's parents asked her to stop holding their son, Teresa insisted she was only helping. The pastor had to ban her from the nursery, which caused a scene in front of the entire congregation. After hearing all this, Phil and I decided we needed to take more serious precautions. We changed the locks, just in case they somehow had an old set of keys. 2 weeks later, we got confirmation those precautions were necessary. Our neighbor across the hall, who has always been kind to us, knocked on our door one Saturday morning. She told us a woman had been asking about us in the lobby the previous afternoon, wanting to know our work schedules and when we usually left the apartment. Our neighbor realized something didn't add up and refused to give her any information. From the description, we knew it had to be Teresa. We also discovered Teresa had been posting in local parenting groups online. One day she was asking for advice on how to introduce a baby into a new home and talking about adoption timelines. I've saved screenshots of some posts before she deleted them. In one, she asked how long it typically takes biological parents to adjust after surrendering a child for adoption. In another, she asked the best way to transition a baby to a new caregiver without causing trauma. Meanwhile, I heard from someone else that my mom had been calling relatives, asking if anyone had heard from us. She told them I was struggling with postpartum depression and needed family support but was too proud to ask. She framed herself as the worried grandmother just trying to help her daughter through a hard time, never once mentioning Teresa's demands. Phil and I realized we had to be more proactive. We drafted a formal letter to my mom, Herbert, and Teresa, making our position absolutely clear. Daniel would remain with us permanently, and any attempt to take him or interfere with our family would result in legal action. We sent the letters by certified mail so we'd have proof they were received, and we kept copies for ourselves. We also began looking at apartments in other cities. We weren't ready to move yet, but we wanted to know our options. And we consulted a family lawyer specializing in custody and protection orders. She reviewed our documentation and said we had grounds for a restraining order if Teresa made any direct contact or threats. Hopefully, it won't come to that, but then again, in an ideal world, I wouldn't have a family full of baby-snatching lunatics. Update 2. Daniel is now 7 months old and has started crawling. He's a very happy baby and rarely cries except when he's hungry or tired. Phil and I have found our rhythm as parents, and I returned to work about 3 months ago. Things had been quiet with my family until last week. We'd started to let our guard down, thinking maybe things had finally improved. Then my cousin called Monday night with news. She works as a social worker in the county where my mom and Herbert live. Someone at her office had been assigned a case involving a couple reported for attempting to buy a baby through illegal channels. When my cousin looked deeper, she was shocked to discover the couple was Herbert and Teresa. Herbert and Teresa had been working with someone they met online who claimed to connect birth mothers with adoptive families. They had already paid several $1,000s in fees and were waiting for a baby to become available. The person they were working with turned out to be running a scam, taking money from desperate couples while pretending to arrange adoptions that would never happen. Several other couples had also lost significant amounts of money in the same fraud. But the most disturbing part was what the investigator found inside Herbert and Teresa's house. The nursery wasn't just decorated for any baby, it was specifically prepared for Daniel. They had printed photos of Daniel, taken from Phil's social media, and placed them in frames around the room. Teresa had been buying clothes in the exact sizes Daniel would need as he grew. She had even created a photo album documenting his first months, as if she had been there all along. The investigator also found a detailed timeline Thaisa had drawn up, showing when she expected Daniel would come live with them. She had marked dates for when she believed we would realize we couldn't handle parenthood, and when the transition would happen. My cousin told me the social worker on the case described the situation as one of the most elaborate delusions she had ever seen. Thaisa genuinely believed Daniel belonged to her, and that everything she was doing was simply preparation for his inevitable arrival. Herbert fully supported Thaisa's delusion. He had been researching grandparents' rights to try to involve my mother, and looking into legal avenues to challenge our custody. He had even consulted with lawyers about what grounds they might have to claim we were unfit parents. The county eventually closed the investigation after determining Herbert and Thaisa were victims of the adoption scam, not perpetrators. However, they did mandate that Thaisa undergo a mental health evaluation due to serious concerns about her grip on reality. My cousin shared all this with me because she was worried for our safety. The social worker had recommended Herbert and Thaisa avoid contact with children until Thaisa received proper treatment, but there was no legal mechanism to enforce it. After that call, Phil and I had a long discussion about what to do next. We realized we needed to take immediate steps to protect Daniel and ourselves. The very next day, we met with our lawyer and gave her all the new information my cousin had shared. Our lawyer was alarmed at the extent of Thaisa's planning and recommended filing for a protective order immediately. She also suggested we thoroughly document Daniel's living environment in case Herbert and Thaisa tried making false reports to Child Protective Services. We took photos of our clean, safe home, gathered medical records for Daniel, and compiled proof of our stable employment. By Wednesday, we received an emergency protective order barring Herbert, Thaisa, and my mother from coming within 500 feet of us or our apartment. It also prohibited any contact through third parties. Although it was only a temporary emergency order, we thought this would finally put an end to the situation. We were wrong. On Friday afternoon, my mom showed up at Phil's workplace. Somehow she got past building security and confronted him as he was leaving. She was crying, begging him to reconsider keeping Daniel away from his family. She said Thaisa was getting worse instead of better, and that seeing Daniel might be the only thing that could heal her. Then my mom asked Phil how much money it would take to allow Thaisa to spend time with Daniel. She offered to pay our rent and childcare costs if we would agree to supervised visits. When Phil told her Daniel was not for sale and that Thaisa needed professional help, my mom got angry. She accused Phil of turning me against my family and of destroying Thaisa's last chance at happiness. Thankfully, Phil had the presence of mind to record the conversation on his phone. That was smart, because my mom later denied saying most of it. Security eventually escorted her out of the building, and Phil's company filed a police report since she had violated the protective order. That weekend, we finally made the decision to move. We had been considering it for months, but this incident convinced us that staying in the area was not safe for any of us. Phil's company had a branch in another state and agreed to transfer him immediately given the circumstances. My company allows remote work, so I could keep my job while we relocated. We're not telling anyone in our family where we're moving. My cousin knows we're leaving the area, but we won't share our new address with her either. We love her and appreciate her trying to help, but we can't risk that information leaking. The hardest part of moving has been accepting that this situation will not resolve itself. Thaisa's delusion has only gotten worse over time, and my mom and Herbert have enabled her instead of getting her the help she desperately needs. I can't stop thinking about that photo album my cousin described, Thaisa collecting and arranging images of Daniel as though she had been there with him all along. The sheer level of fantasy and planning involved is terrifying. Update 3. Daniel is now 15 months old and running everywhere. Sometimes I swear he even walks on the walls like a little spider baby. We've been in our new city for 4 months, and for the first time, we finally feel like we can breathe again. Phil loves his new job, and while I don't mind working remotely, I know it limits my career growth, so I've started looking for local opportunities. During those first months after moving, I still had that constant sense of dread, always waiting for something to happen. But gradually, that constant anxiety has started to fade. 2 months ago, my cousin called with an update that finally brought some closure to the situation. Thaisa had been hospitalized after what Herbert described to relatives as a nervous breakdown. My cousin didn't have details on what triggered it, but Thaisa was admitted to a psychiatric facility for 3 weeks. During Thaisa's treatment, Herbert finally began seeing a counselor individually. According to my cousin, Herbert admitted to the counselor that he had been so focused on helping Thaisa cope with her grief that he lost all perspective on what was reasonable. Apparently, Herbert told the counselor that he knew taking someone else's baby was wrong, but Thaisa's pain had been so overwhelming that he convinced himself they were actually helping everyone involved. He said he had truly believed that eventually we would realize we couldn't handle parenthood, and that we'd be grateful for his intervention. The counselor helped Herbert understand that enabling Thaisa's delusion had actually prevented her from processing her grief in a healthy way. Instead of facing the reality of her loss, Thaisa had created an elaborate fantasy that allowed her to avoid dealing with her pain. After Thaisa was discharged from the hospital, she and Herbert moved to another state where Thaisa's sister lives. My mom, meanwhile, has been struggling with the fallout from everything that happened. Several family members have distanced themselves from her after learning about her role in pressuring us to give up Daniel. My cousin said my mom has been telling people that she was just trying to help everyone and that things spiraled out of control, that she never intended for it to go so far. But my cousin also told me that my mom had been researching grandparents' rights, just like Herbert, and had even consulted with lawyers to see if she could argue that we were unfit parents because of our age and work schedules. Apparently, she believed that if she could build a legal case for the family to gain custody, we'd eventually agree to let Thaisa raise Daniel rather than face a court battle. She truly believed that was a reasonable solution that would make everyone happy. Learning this confirmed for me that moving was the right decision. My mom hadn't just pressured us emotionally, she had actively worked to undermine our parental rights. My cousin asked if I wanted her to pass along my mom's request for contact, to try to rebuild our relationship. I said no. Phil and I are planning to have another baby within the next year or 2. When we do, no one from my original family will know about the pregnancy until we decide if and when to share the news. Phil's parents visit regularly and have become wonderful grandparents to Daniel. They are everything my family should have been, but weren't. I know some people reading this might think I should have tried harder to help Thaisa through her grief, or given my mom another chance to show she had changed. But I cannot leave my child in the care of someone whose grasp on reality was that distorted. Children are not therapeutic tools for adults struggling with loss. Daniel's only job is to be a happy, healthy little boy, not to heal someone else's trauma or fill their emptiness. The restraining order is still in place, though we haven't needed it since we moved. We keep copies of all documentation in case we ever need legal protection again, but I hope we never will. Moving across the country to escape your own family is not something anyone plans for, but sometimes it's necessary. Update 4. The plan had been to have another child in a year or 2 from my last update, but well, sometimes life doesn't go as planned and you end up pregnant earlier than expected. So, we're now expecting baby number 2. It's not exactly unplanned, but it definitely came earlier than we had envisioned. Still, we're happy about it, because it means our second child will be closer in age to Daniel than we thought. I'm 2 months pregnant now. But that's not the only news. My brother and Thaisa are divorcing, or rather, they've begun the process, but it's happening. Herbert is currently living with my mom, at least until he finds something else for himself. Thaisa is staying with her parents. I haven't seen her in a long time, but from what I hear, even though she's improving, she's still struggling with her issues. A part of me feels bad for her, but I also remember how she made my life hell during my pregnancy. My mom has been trying to get information about me from relatives, hoping to reunite the family. But either people don't have that information, or they refuse to give it to her. My mom is still very unpopular within the family because of everything she did. As for my brother, I'm not sure, but it's possible he's helping her. We feel safe, the few people who know where we live would never share it. We're also being extremely careful about who knows about this pregnancy. Eventually, they'll find out, but I hope it's later rather than sooner, ideally when our second child is in college, if possible. I'm sorry if anyone expected a happy family healing update. I don't think I'll ever have one of those for you. I don't believe I can forgive my mom or my brother for what they let happen with Tisa. In fact, I see Tisa as a victim in all this too, because if my mom and Herbert had gotten her the help she needed instead of feeding her delusions, all of this could have ended differently, and I'd never have had to write this story.